I think we're live. And no, it's not 7 a.m. It's actually 4:10 right now. My son has a big gig at a venue. It's not with his main band. I'm a little bit tired because I already did my first 8+ miles. And I do it when I can. That's what this is all about. Continuous training, gradual intensity training, where I ruminate, philosophize. And the subjects that are being talked about now have been things that were pressing on me. I even wrote books about them a decade ago. I didn't have a huge education in that area, in that field, i.e. English, writing skills, using proper context, and grammatical errors that I come up with are just like, it became too cumbersome just to edit my own books, and I have a lot of them. So I turned to a blog, esotericprinciplesoflight.blogspot.com, because there was just a strange phenomenon with the information that's available. And I'm shooting for, not to get off track here, but I'm shooting for maximum mileage. I may even be able to get another 8 in. And this is just all about oxidizing. So you'll have to forgive me as I sink into the next bout here. And mainly transhumanism, the future consciousness, and even what Bryan Armstrong is doing. When I was his age, and a few years prior to that, I was effectively on YouTube, and I erased that original channel. I finally took it off just last week. But I completely erased every video that I'd done out of 350 videos where I would do movies. And this is 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And I didn't like what it was doing. I didn't like the guru status. It's dangerous. Right now, though, from the meditations that I learned and what I've been doing, it'll make your head spin if you're that sociopathically inclined, if you're that narcissistically inclined. And that's a real big subject, is that when you are reaching toward enlightenment, there is a phase where this is talked about in every context, every book that you could possibly imagine, written and unwritten. And it's about, in the realization of self, there's a godhood, a hierarchy of a certain triage, and the inevitable conclusion is that you're in your own echo chamber, echoing back your own dialogue to yourself, and you begin to realize yourself as God, or the Godhead, or a God. And as this energy refracts back to you, you then realize the limitation that you've cast upon yourself, the exclusion. And if you're being supported in that, this is the age of the celebrity. This is what happens as a result of the celebrity. So it took me all this time getting fat, getting out of shape, casting away the superficial aspects, only to see that I was still existentially trying to create that eye upon myself. So What we're talking about is a very pressing need for most of us who incurred damage, and most of us who, it's part of the process. I mean, this ties directly into everything that's being discussed on the concrete channel. What's his name? I almost said Brett Michaels. Gosh, with all the blood circulating in my stomach and systemically at this point, I'm not thinking like I do in the morning, and I'm thinking slow in the morning as it is. But ontological studies, epistemological studies, looking at things through a certain orthodoxy from a scientific perspective, and starting to see how we are like these fractals reacting to ourselves, and then like heart cells in a petri dish, we begin to beat in unison to a sort of one mind principle, and that many have been lost on this road in the past, but we cannot look past the fact that we are being inundated with so much information that this type of quickening is so rare an occurrence that we are alive during this precipice, this time. And to look back and say, wow, all those who lived before us, now that we have searched deeper into these ontological truths, we see that it was us in culminate, and that makes it even more unique and special, right? So here we are, self-perfecting from an existential perspective in a dark room, but the illumination is there, man. And it doesn't stop. And in fact, it gets more intense and reverberates back in a more, I'm not going to say bigger and grand way, because I've spent a year or two, when I say a year or two, there was a gap in between, but then I went right back into this lucid dreaming for 8 to 10 hours every night, and I was flying. I mean, learning to flap my wings, perfecting the technique, running, going up in the air, flying, and flying around and perching myself sometimes in areas for hours at a time. And then I would fly away, and I remember it. And it was so bizarre. And then there were times where I was in the physical form that I'm in, that I wasn't in kind of a bird form, shall we say, that I was able to do the same things. And, you could get into a Jungian philosophy of analyzing dreams, or, even to talk about UFOs as being a symbol for this sort of higher mind conceptualization. But then to realize that this is happening in the so-called existential. So I started to play with that. Many years ago, I started to play with that notion. Many, many years ago. And I went, how impacting can the mental mind focus and acuity affect the outside world? Everybody wants power at first, right? Our power is taken from us. Is it done on purpose? Is this done intentionally to see how we would react to at least thinking that we have a certain power? Power over others? So when we claim to have power over others, we're assuming that they aren't capable of conceptualizing the same truths as we are. And then it gets into the fact that we fully realize that consciousness is completely immersive as an experience. Is it shared? Is it a one mind consciousness? Is it a grand unified sort of string theory that's occurring? Or are these things just trails of ontological construct that lead us back to a higher truth that we really couldn't understand unless we were stuck in the form? Form follows function, function into form, into this solidified assumption. So we have to then reach with our souls, reach with our spirit at first. But there are those who are narcissistically inclined. And that brings about the confusion in government and every other walk, avenue, and even takes place in the Nag Hammadi, if you will, and gets into the gospel of truth, which I've talked about before, the jars that Jesus speaks of, the jars that are made too thin, but ultimately erred, asymmetrical. There's plenty of us that are missing part of our tooth, maybe a lot of teeth. Maybe we have an asymmetrical shift physically. But how much of that is damage that's been to us, not only in this lifetime, but past lives? We carry that with us. In fact, there's a whole area of study that gets in between into the right and left, right? And this sort of juxtaposed position of the two in contrast, and shows that the thinnest margin can be actually a chasm when you get closer to it. That there is a left-hand path and that there is a right-hand path. So how does this all pertain back to perfection and transhumanism, and even more so, what we are as information? That if we can meditate out into the field, higher mind concepts that can be ascertained by those who search for it, and that a cybernetic networking system could further bolster and influence this. However, only utilizing parameters where people would have to eventually build themselves up together as a unifying system, knowing that all of your errors, my errors, our errors, where we assume a self, and when we've worked past the need for a power trip, any display of megalomania or demagoguery, that what's left, the essence, could be compared to, and I don't want to turn people off because I really take that pill begrudgingly also, is that we created the religions, okay? We always leave ourselves out of the process, just like we always leave the sun out of the process. Like that sun that shines on us every day, and the filters that we place over that, whether from clandestine organizations in a more factual way or through a permeating consciousness. And we're, in essence, let's just say in a proverbial sense, removing those filters and being exposed to the pure light of reason and being. And this does something. This breaks through dimensional time and space. It's the speed of thought. You know, it's the translation of I have become, and now through a sort of Metcalf spontaneity, that there will be a change within us all. That our programming, from a binary code sense, is not only amendable, but it is something that can withstand addition. But it has to be exposed. You know, I'm loosely talking about epigenetics, but I'm also talking about something that that's transductive, where it gets into a transformational aspect. We all feel it. It's not something that's just exclusive to one person any longer. People have gone through their reactions. We've gone through the reactionary phase. And once that's done, you're screaming and you're still falling, and you're like, okay, I've been screaming for several years now. I'm still falling, but so is the person next to me. We haven't hit the ground yet. It's time for us to go in and postulate other predictable avenues of possibilities. And so the free fall that we're all afraid of isn't really a free fall. The vacuum that we think really contains like empty space, or, you know, what's conjectured about dark matter. Well, there's something more to it. We don't have all the answers. So in a sense, our sense of sociopathy and narcissism, let's not smooth it over, has a singular consciousness. It has a singular charisma. It has a singular personality. When you take all of us, we're just fractions of a whole. You know, we can get overly cerebral and start to designate, you know, etymological nomenclature, like I've said in other videos, where we say, you know, that's monad or integer or any other name that we choose. But that's when we're trying to hold on to an aspect of the false self. And with all these repeating useless aspects to our genome that tied us into the temporal, the corporeal, carnal aspects of the earth, in a sense, whether we're here or not, we're blasting off. There's enough of us pushing this. It's beyond a narrative. It's beyond a notion. There's people in silent protest that have fully understood that this is a spiritual war, and then realize that what we once were afraid of because we couldn't see, and that destroyed our lives, malevolent entities, that once we start using our imaginations alone, we not only fight back, but they start to leave us alone. They become afraid of us. We have a lot of power. We have a lot of power in that unity. In democracy, our differences are celebrated. But in the non-transhumanistic, transitional, omnipresent mind, all of those errors are burned away. And we seek to perfect. We seek to purify. I used to think that we would all just burn away, that there was so much error in us, and that there could only be one. But now that we know that energy cannot be created nor destroyed, it becomes our task, our mission, to fight against the carbon rot itself, campaigning on our own within ourselves as to purify and perfect the self. Now we know. Now we know why the attack has been done on us specifically, why we little people are so important. And so your ability to do something like this is the definable difference of wherever you are and whoever you might assert yourself to be. That purity and perfection is yours, that you must claim it, and that there are a lot of tricks and a lot of loopholes, from contracts to financial trickery, and that you never lose the ability, even when you think that a ritual has been done on you, that your power's been taken from you, that you've been cancel cultured out. I'm still here. I'm still moving my feet. I'm still exercising out the demons. And I'm still drawing in the power. So nothing can stop you. In the past, people would turn to a sense of, I got away with this, megalomaniac. But we are all exposed through total transparency. And most of the things that happen to you, if not all, were done to you through a machinating presence, from a maligned and jealous presence that had more envy and hatred and jealousy of you, and in a very strange way, in a very theological way, in a very Christian God-like way, may have been allowed to do that only to bolster your understanding of what I'm talking about now. So it's like, instead of an alpha, we have an omni. We are in the omnipresence of the self. We realize that we were to turn this mausoleum, this temple, this castle, this holy sepulchre, we were to turn this into the most profound experience and deal with it and not take leave from it. And when we looked over and we saw our brother or our sister, it wasn't a carnal influence. We began to keep our eyes down and our heads down in total reverence and bliss, knowing that to look upon a God was to look upon the self. Can you imagine that? To see total validation of what we've reached. And that the question is it a limited few? Or is it everyone? Is it a sifting mechanism that happens over 13,000 year, 26,000 year cycles, on integrator macro cycles? I feel like we're in a special time where everyone has the opportunity to evolve to their higher selves, to the higher mind. But maybe that is the contention that happens every time. Maybe in our failure on the last big cycle revolution, success is going to happen this time.